get it the first few weeks. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm so tired. I think I've made a big mistake coming here.
Oliver Stone's Platoon hit theaters in 1986 and changed war movies forever. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Critics called it the most realistic Vietnam War film ever made. But behind the jungle combat and the iconic Willem Dafoe death scene, this production was absolutely insane. The cast went through actual military boot camp in the Philippine jungle. Real Vietnam veterans worked as advisors, and some even appeared in the film. And the stories from the set? They're darker and stranger than anything that made it onto the screen. These are 19 weird facts you didn't know about Platoon. Number 1. Charlie Sheen was not Oliver Stone's first choice for Chris Taylor, and the actor who almost got the role would have completely changed the film. Stone originally wanted Keanu Reeves, who was only 21 at the time and relatively unknown. Reeves auditioned and impressed Stone with his intensity, but the studio pushed back hard. They wanted a name that could sell tickets. Enter Charlie Sheen, whose father, Martin Sheen, had starred in Apocalypse Now 7 years earlier. Stone saw the connection immediately. The son of Captain Willard playing a grunt in the jungle felt almost poetic. But here's where it gets weird. Sheen didn't just get the role because of his last name. He actually lived in a hotel room for 2 weeks before the audition and barely ate, trying to look gaunt and exhausted. When he walked into the room, Stone later said he looked like he'd already been in Vietnam. That commitment sealed the deal. Number 2. The boot camp the actors endured in the Philippines wasn't just for show, it was designed to break them. Oliver Stone hired Dale Dye, a retired Marine captain and Vietnam veteran, to run the training. Dye didn't ease them into it. He threw the entire cast into the jungle for 2 weeks with almost no food, minimal sleep, and constant physical punishment. They slept in the mud. They slept in the They ate military rations that were intentionally spoiled to simulate field conditions. Dye screamed at them, made them dig foxholes in the rain, and forced them to carry full packs on long marches through dense jungle terrain. Charlie Sheen lost 10 pounds. Johnny Depp, who had a small role, nearly quit. Forrest Whitaker got dysentery. And the whole time, Dye treated them like actual soldiers, not actors. He made them refer to each other by their character names. If someone broke character, everyone got punished. Stone wanted the exhaustion and fear to be real on camera, and Dye delivered. By the time filming started, the actors genuinely looked like they'd been at war for months. Number 3. Tom Berenger's transformation into Sergeant Barnes is one of the most disturbing physical transformations in film history, and it almost didn't happen. The scar that runs down Barnes' face wasn't just makeup. Well, it was makeup, but the design came from a real wound Oliver Stone witnessed in Vietnam. Stone saw a sergeant with a nearly identical scar caused by shrapnel, and the man's face had healed in a way that pulled his eye down slightly and twisted his lip. Stone sketched it from memory and handed it to the makeup team. They spent weeks perfecting the prosthetic scar using silicone and paint to make it look like old, healed tissue. But Berenger wasn't happy with it at first. He thought it looked too fake under the lights. So the makeup artist, who had worked on horror films, added layers of texture and discoloration until it looked like real damaged skin. Berenger wore that prosthetic for 12 hours a day in the humid Philippine jungle. The adhesive caused infections. His skin underneath would blister and peel. And he couldn't fully close his eye on that side, which gave Barnes that terrifying dead-eyed stare. Berenger later said the scar changed the way he walked and talked. It genuinely made him feel like a different person. Number 4. Willem Dafoe's iconic death scene, where Sergeant Elias is gunned down by the helicopter while raising his arms, was shot in one take. And it almost killed him. The scene required Dafoe to run through an open field while squibs, small explosive charges used to simulate bullet hits, detonated across his chest and body. Squibs are dangerous. They're essentially tiny bombs strapped to an actor's skin, and if one misfires or detonates too close, it can cause serious burns or even break ribs. Dafoe had over 20 squibs attached to his torso. The effects team assured him they'd tested everything. But when the cameras rolled and the squibs started going off, One of them misfired and detonated early. Dafoe felt a searing pain across his ribs, but kept running because he knew they wouldn't get another chance at the shot. The helicopter circling overhead was burning fuel by the minute and the light was fading fast. So Dafoe ran, got hit by the remaining squibs, threw his arms up in that Christ-like pose, and collapsed. When Oliver Stone yelled "cut," Dafoe had a second-degree burn on his side and was coughing from the smoke. But the shot was perfect. Stone didn't even consider doing another take. That image of Elias dying in the field became the most iconic moment in the entire film, and it almost sent Dafoe to the hospital. Number 5. The film's soundtrack was not Oliver Stone's original vision. Stone wanted a completely different musical approach. He originally planned to use period-accurate rock and roll tracks from the 60s, songs that soldiers actually listened to in Vietnam. He wanted Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, Creedence Clearwater Revival, but the licensing costs were astronomical. The studio refused to pay. So Stone brought in composer Georges Delerue, but even that didn't go as planned. Delerue composed a traditional orchestral score, but Stone hated it. He thought it felt too Hollywood, too polished. Then someone on the production team suggested Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, a classical piece from 1936 that had nothing to do with Vietnam or the 60s. Stone was skeptical, but when he laid the Adagio over the scene where Elias dies, everything changed. The mournful, swelling strings turned the death into something transcendent. It elevated the violence into tragedy. Stone kept it, and that piece of music became so associated with war and loss that it's now played at military funerals. But here's the weird part. Barber's estate initially didn't want the piece used in a war film. They thought it would be disrespectful. Stone had to personally call them and explain his vision before they agreed. Number 6. Johnny Depp's role in Platoon was almost completely cut from the film. Depp played Lerner, a translator who appears in only a few scenes. He had more lines originally, including a longer sequence where he interrogates a Vietnamese villager. But during editing, Stone realized the pacing was dragging. He started cutting scenes and most of Depp's footage ended up on the floor. Depp didn't even know his role had been gutted until he saw the film at the premiere. He later said he sat in the theater waiting for his big scene, and it never came. His total screen time ended up being less than 2 minutes. But here's the strange twist. That same year, Depp was cast in the TV show 21 Jump Street, which turned him into a teen idol. If Platoon had given him a bigger role and more attention, he might not have taken the TV gig. And if he hadn't done 21 Jump Street, his entire career trajectory would have been different. So, in a way, Oliver Stone cutting Depp's scenes accidentally created the Johnny Depp we know today. Number 7. The village massacre scene was so realistic that several crew members walked off set and refused to continue working on the film. The scene, where American soldiers brutalized Vietnamese villagers, was based on real events Oliver Stone witnessed during his tour. Stone didn't hold back. He showed soldiers beating elderly men, threatening women, and burning homes. The actors playing the villagers were real Filipino locals, many of whom had lived through their own experiences of war and violence. When the cameras started rolling, the American actors, who were method acting and fully in character, became genuinely aggressive. The Filipino extras were terrified. Some of them were crying real tears. One woman, who was supposed to be dragged out of a hut, had a panic attack and couldn't continue. Stone didn't yell "cut." He let the cameras keep rolling because he wanted that raw, unfiltered fear. But several crew members, including a camera assistant and 2 grips, walked off the set after that day. They said it felt too much like watching an actual atrocity. Stone later defended the scene, saying that if people were uncomfortable watching it, good. That was the point. War is uncomfortable. But the psychological toll on the cast and crew was real, and some of them never spoke to Stone again after the film wrapped. Number 8. Forrest Whitaker's character, Big Harold, was almost played by a completely different actor who would have taken the film in a very different direction. Stone originally wanted Lawrence Fishburne, who had already played a soldier in Apocalypse Now when he was just 14 years old. Fishburne read for the role and was Stone's top choice, but Fishburne turned it down. He later said he didn't want to be typecast as a soldier. and he was worried that doing another Vietnam film so soon after Apocalypse Now would pigeonhole him. Stone was frustrated, but he moved on and cast Forrest Whitaker, who brought a completely different energy to Big Harold. Whitaker played him as gentle and spiritual, a soldier who was more concerned with survival than glory. Fishburne would have played him harder, more cynical. The character would have been unrecognizable. And here's the kicker. Fishburne later said turning down Platoon was one of the biggest regrets of his career, especially after the film won Best Picture and became a cultural phenomenon. Number 9. The scene where Chris Taylor smokes marijuana from a shotgun barrel was not acting. That was real marijuana, and Charlie Sheen was genuinely high during the take. Oliver Stone wanted the scene to feel authentic, so he didn't use fake prop weed. He got actual cannabis, which was still illegal in the Philippines at the time, and had the actors smoke it on camera. Sheen later admitted he was so stoned during that scene that he could barely remember his lines. He said the paranoia you see on his face, the wide-eyed confusion, that wasn't acting. He was legitimately out of his mind. Stone loved it. He thought the scene felt more real than anything they could have faked. But it caused problems. After that day of shooting, several actors were too high to work. Production shut down early, and the Philippine authorities, who were already suspicious of the American film crew, started asking questions about what exactly was being smoked on set. Stone had to bribe a local official to make the problem go away. The entire production could have been shut down over one scene, but Stone didn't care. He got the shot he wanted, and it became one of the most memorable moments in the film. Number 10. The Philippine military, which provided support and equipment for the film, had no idea what the movie was actually about. Oliver Stone told them he was making a film about American heroism in Vietnam. He showed them early script pages that focused on camaraderie and courage. He left out the parts about war crimes, drug use, and the moral collapse of American soldiers. The Philippine government, led by Ferdinand Marcos at the time, was eager to support anything that made the military look good. They provided helicopters, weapons, and even active-duty soldiers to work as extras. But when Stone started filming the darker scenes, the military advisors on set became uncomfortable. They saw the village massacre. They saw the drug use. They realized Stone had lied to them. Several of them went back to their commanders and reported what was happening. The Marcos regime considered shutting down the production, but by that point, Stone had already shot most of the film. And the regime was dealing with its own political instability. The people power revolution was brewing, so they let it go. But Stone later admitted that if the Philippine military had known the true nature of the film, they never would have supported it. He basically tricked an authoritarian government into funding an anti-war movie. Number 11. Keith David, who played King, was so method during the shoot that he stayed in character even when cameras weren't rolling. He refused to leave the jungle camp where the cast was staying. He slept in his costume. He ate only military rations. He wouldn't break character even during downtime. The other actors thought he was losing his mind. Charlie Sheen later said that Keith David scared him. Not because David was aggressive, but because he seemed genuinely disconnected from reality. David would sit by himself, staring into the jungle, muttering his character's lines. He stopped showering. He stopped shaving. Oliver Stone loved it. He thought David's intensity was exactly what the film needed. But David's wife, who visited the set halfway through production, was horrified. She said her husband looked like a homeless person and barely recognized her. She begged him to take a break, to come back to the hotel and rest. David refused. He stayed in the jungle for the entire shoot. When filming wrapped, it took him weeks to decompress. He later said playing King changed him permanently. He couldn't shake the weight of it. And to this day, he rarely talks about the experience in interviews. Number 12. The combat scenes were choreographed by a Vietnam veteran who didn't use traditional Hollywood stunt techniques. He used actual military tactics. Dale Dye, the Marine captain who ran the boot camp, also designed every firefight in the film. And he refused to let the actors take cover behind obvious safe spots like trees or rocks. He made them dive into real mud, crawl through actual underbrush, and move the way soldiers would move under fire. During one scene where the platoon gets ambushed at night, Dye set off real explosions around the actors without telling them exactly when or where the charges would detonate. He wanted genuine fear and confusion. Charlie Sheen later said that during that scene he thought he was actually going to die. The explosions were so close that dirt and debris hit him in the face. He couldn't hear anything but ringing in his ears, and Dye kept yelling at them to keep moving, to stay in character. Several actors got minor injuries. One extra broke his ankle, another got a concussion from a blast that went off too close. But Stone kept the cameras rolling. He later said that the chaos and terror you see on screen is real because the actors genuinely didn't know what was going to happen next. Number 13. Tom Berenger and Willem Dafoe genuinely hated each other during filming, and Oliver Stone encouraged it. Stone wanted the tension between Sergeant Barnes and Sergeant Elias to feel real, so he manipulated the two actors off camera. He told Berenger that Dafoe was complaining about his performance. He told Dafoe that Berenger thought he was too soft for the role. Neither of these things were true, but Stone wanted to create animosity, and it worked. Berenger and Dafoe stopped speaking to each other between takes. They wouldn't make eye contact. When they had to share a scene, the hostility was palpable. Stone loved it. He thought the audience could feel the hatred radiating through the screen. But after filming wrapped, Berenger and Dafoe found out what Stone had done. They were furious. Dafoe later said he felt manipulated and betrayed. Berenger called Stone a manipulative director who cared more about results than people. The two actors didn't speak to Stone for years after the film was released, but they eventually reconciled and both admitted that Stone's manipulation worked. The tension between Barnes and Elias is one of the most compelling aspects of the film, and it wouldn't have been as powerful if they'd been friendly on set. Number 14. The final battle scene, where the North Vietnamese army overruns the American position, used real Vietnamese refugees as extras. These were people who had fled Vietnam after the war and were living in refugee camps in the Philippines. Oliver Stone hired them to play NVA soldiers, which meant they were essentially reenacting the war they had lived through. Some of them had been actual soldiers. Some had been civilians caught in the crossfire. And now they were being asked to put on uniforms and charge through the jungle while explosions went off around them. Several of them broke down on set. One man, who had been a South Vietnamese soldier, refused to wear the North Vietnamese uniform. He said it felt like a betrayal of everything he'd fought for. Stone tried to convince him, but the man walked off and never came back. Another refugee who played a dead NVA soldier later told a translator that being on set brought back memories he'd spent years trying to forget. He said he could hear the real screams of people dying, not the actors. Stone later admitted he felt guilty about putting these men through that experience. But he also said their presence gave the film an authenticity that couldn't be faked. You can see it in their faces. These weren't actors pretending to be soldiers, they were men who knew exactly what war looked like. Number 15. The script was based on Oliver Stone's real experiences in Vietnam, but several key events in the film never actually happened to him. The character of Sergeant Barnes was inspired by a real Sergeant Stone served under, but Stone exaggerated the violence and brutality for dramatic effect. The real sergeant was tough and ruthless, but he didn't murder fellow soldiers or threaten villagers the way Barnes does in the film. Stone later admitted he combined traits from multiple people he knew in Vietnam and created a composite character. The village massacre scene was based on reports Stone heard from other soldiers, not something he personally witnessed. And the final confrontation between Chris Taylor and Barnes, where Taylor shoots Barnes in cold blood, was completely fictional. Stone said it was a metaphor for killing the darkness inside himself, not a literal event. But when the film was released, many veterans accused Stone of exaggerating or even lying about what happened in Vietnam. Some said the film portrayed American soldiers as monsters and ignored the heroism and sacrifice of most troops. Stone defended himself, saying Platoon was never meant to be a documentary. It was a dramatization of the moral ambiguity and psychological horror of war. But the controversy followed him for years, and some veterans still refused to watch the film. Number 16. Charlie Sheen had a nervous breakdown during filming and almost quit the movie halfway through. The combination of the brutal boot camp, the physical exhaustion, the heat, and the isolation in the jungle pushed Sheen to his breaking point. About 3 weeks into production, he called his father Martin Sheen and said he couldn't do it anymore. He said he felt like he was losing his mind. Martin flew to the Philippines to talk to his son. He found Charlie sitting alone in a hotel room, unshaven and barely coherent. Martin later said his son looked like he'd aged 10 years. He convinced Charlie to stick it out, telling him that Platoon could be the role that defined his career. Charlie agreed to stay, but he told Oliver Stone he needed a break. Stone refused. He said the exhaustion and mental strain were exactly what he needed for the character. If Charlie took a break and came back rested, the performance would lose its edge. So Charlie kept working, kept pushing himself to the edge of collapse. And Stone was right. The haunted, hollow look in Sheen's eyes throughout the film is real. He wasn't acting, he was genuinely falling apart. Number 17. The film's budget was so low that Oliver Stone had to make deals with local Filipino businesses to get equipment and locations. The studio gave him $6 million, which was tiny for a war film even in the 80s. Stone couldn't afford to build sets or rent expensive equipment, so he negotiated with local vendors. He convinced a Filipino farmer to let them use his land for the jungle scenes in exchange for a small fee and a credit in the film. He borrowed helicopters from the Philippine Air Force and paid for fuel out of his own pocket. He even used real Vietnam-era weapons that he found in a Manila pawn shop. But the low budget caused constant problems. The cameras broke down in the humid jungle. The film stock degraded in the heat. And the crew, many of whom were inexperienced local hires, made mistakes that cost time and money. Stone later said that every day of filming felt like a battle just to keep the production alive. But the constraints forced him to be creative. He couldn't rely on big explosions or elaborate set pieces. He had to focus on the characters and the story, and that limitation made the film better. Platoon feels raw and stripped down because it was made with almost no money and no safety net. Number 18. The film was almost banned in several countries, including the United Kingdom, because of its graphic violence and depiction of American war crimes. British censors initially refused to give the film a rating, saying it was too disturbing for public release. Oliver Stone had to personally fly to London and meet with the British Board of Film Classification to argue for the film's release. He told them that sanitizing war was more dangerous than showing its brutality. He said people needed to see the truth, even if it made them uncomfortable. The board eventually agreed and gave the film an 18 rating, but only after Stone agreed to cut a few seconds of the village massacre scene. In Australia, the film was initially banned outright. The Australian government said it depicted American soldiers in a way that could damage relations between the two countries. Stone fought back, and after weeks of negotiations, the ban was lifted. But in some countries, the film was never released theatrically. It went straight to video, and even then, heavily censored versions were the only ones available. Stone later said that the controversy proved his point. People didn't want to see the ugly truth about war. They wanted heroic myths. But Platoon refused to give them that. Number 19. The film's success destroyed Oliver Stone's friendship with several Vietnam veterans who had helped him make the movie. Stone had relied on advice from real soldiers, men he'd served with in Vietnam. He asked them to read the script and give notes. He invited them to the set to ensure the details were accurate. But when the film came out and became a cultural phenomenon, some of those veterans felt betrayed. They said Stone had taken their stories and experiences and used them for profit and fame without giving them credit. One veteran, who had been a close friend of Stone's, publicly accused him of exploiting their shared trauma. He said Stone turned their suffering into entertainment. Stone tried to defend himself, saying the film honored their experiences and forced America to confront the reality of Vietnam. But the damage was done. Several veterans cut ties with Stone and refused to speak to him again. One man who had saved Stone's life during a firefight in Vietnam said he regretted ever helping with the film. Stone later admitted that the success of Platoon came at a personal cost. He lost friends, he lost relationships, and he carried guilt about it for years. So there you have it. 19 weird facts about Platoon that most people never knew. Oliver Stone didn't just make a war movie. He dragged his cast through hell, manipulated his actors, lied to governments, and burned bridges with the people who had helped him survive Vietnam. But the result was one of the most powerful and unflinching war films ever made. a film that forced an entire generation to confront the truth about a war they wanted to forget.